Chapter 6. I may have mentioned that dachshunds do not like heights, but if Walter Kennewicket was going to the rooftops, I was going too. My lab coat would have to hide my trembling. I collected my courage and followed Wally up flight after flight of stairs. When we reached the roof, the wind whipped my ears as Wally and the president started up the long ladder that clung to the side of the turret. Thankfully, it was completely impossible for me to follow. Dachshunds do not navigate ladders. Wally's canvas coattails flapped like a flag as he climbed. Watching him made my head spin and my stomach feel light, as if gravity were turning topsy-turvy, and at any moment my paws might lose their grip, and I would fall up into the wide blue sky and tumble away forever. I tucked my tail and covered my goggles with my paws. When Wally returned at last from the terrible blue abyss, I could not contain my joy. "Look at that wagger go," said President Roosevelt. "If it were a propeller, the fellow'd be a proper whirligig." Wally picked me up, and I licked his chin all the way down the stairs. When we reached the lab, we retired our coats and goggles, and the president donned his disguise once more. Then we returned to the comfort of the lobby. The door to the private parlor was still closed. "That was a bully tour," Theodore Roosevelt said, which meant he thought that Wally had done a very good job. "You answered my every question, Walter. Is there anything you would like to ask me? Aside from questions about the you-know-whos, of course." Wally hesitated. "Out with it, son," the president said. "What would you like to know?" "I have long been curious about the Oriental art of judo," the president exclaimed, assuming a fighting stance. "Some things must be demonstrated, not discussed." He expertly executed 7 effective combat stances and 1 keen judo throw, then let Wally have a go. The door to the private parlor opened. "Mr. and Mrs. Kennewicket will see you now," Gizmo announced, as Wally helped the president to his feet. Wally is small, but he excels at sports. Calypso and Oliver were both standing when we entered the room. "Here, Walter," Calypso said. Everyone looked discreetly away as Wally quickly combed down his electrified locks. "We have concluded that our son is correct," Oliver announced when Wally was in order again. "Sometimes citizenship requires sacrifice. We must do what we can." "It is our duty as citizens to protect the president," Calypso added, "and as intelligent beings to save the world. Walter will watch over the experiments for his father, and Gizmo will run the convention." "Well done, Walter," the president said. "My coach will arrive in 30 minutes. "So quickly?" Calypso asked. "I signaled my Secret Service men from the top of the turret." "We must move fast. The Mesmers may be scheming even as we speak." "There is no point in our assuming disguises, I assume?" Oliver looked hopefully at the president's hobo gear. "None," Calypso decreed. "Our standing in the scientific community will offer the cover we need." It was true that the Kennewickets were often out and about in odd company. "It goes without saying," Oliver said, "that no magicians of any sort should be admitted to the inn in our absence." "Of course not, Father," Wally agreed. "Summon Melvin and Prissy, Gizmo," instructed Calypso, "and assemble the staff. We mustn't leave without saying goodbye. I'll compose a note for Professor Potts." Half an hour later, the staff and family were assembled in the lobby of the inn. Gizmo had not only summoned the staff, but also prepared a picnic breakfast for the travelers to take along. Chapter 7. Calypso had dressed stylishly as always, with a map case and brass spyglass by her side. Oliver's jacket and boots gave him a piratical air, belied only by the handsome top hat and assortment of tools, fobs, and plumb bobs that hung from his pockets and belt. In short, they were as elegant and well-prepared as ever. I walked proudly beside them as they surveyed the staff. Knives, the silent assistant cook, whose multiple bladed attachments allow him to slice, dice, chop, and puree at incredible speeds, stood at attention on one side of Gizmo. Talos, the towering bronze footman who had assumed many of the butler's duties after the unfortunate incident with Jeeves, stood on the other. The maids and kitchen help were arrayed behind them. I felt the elder Kennewickets could be confident leaving the inn in the hands of such a competent crew. Oliver gave them a few last-moment instructions, while Calypso hugged Melvin, then Prissy.
"But why are you hurrying off with this hobo?" Prissy whined. "We can't tell you that just yet, dear." Calypso plucked a feather from Prissy's sleeve before Wally could catch wind of it. "But we hope to reveal all when we return. In the meantime, please provide Gizmo with any help she requires." I wished, and not for the first time, that I had the power of human speech. If the elder Kennewickets knew what rotters Melvin and Prissy were, they'd lock them in their respective rooms until they returned. But they didn't. "Take care of the coops, Melvin," Oliver instructed instead. "Right-ho," Melvin said. "Remember to oil the other automatons, Gizmo," Calypso added. "And don't forget to wind the dust bunnies. We wouldn't want the inn to be untidy. Dust bunnies are a great deal of trouble. They must be wound once a day, or they simply cease to dust." "Give my regrets to Mr. Jones, Walter," Oliver said. "We will miss our meeting. And remember to record the readings both before and after the storm." Calypso kissed Wally's cheek and smoothed his hair, which had started to stand up again. "I expect you will look after my atmospheric experiments admirably, son." Oliver offered his hand. I could see that the thought of his parents going off to save the world without him was difficult for Wally, for he swallowed hard before he shook his father's hand. "Yes, sir, I will." "Noodles!" Oliver nodded when he saw me sitting up, ready for my instructions. "Take care of Wally for us." It pleased me that Oliver and Calypso knew I didn't need to be told to keep the dust bunnies in line. Dachshunds are always on the job. "We'll return as soon as we are able." Calypso straightened the crimson lace of her parasol. "Until then, we are depending on you all to keep the inn in tip-top form." I heard the rattle of carriage wheels on the drive. Talos picked up the Kennewickets' bags, and Gizmo dismissed the staff. Melvin and Prissy were conspiring in the corner when Wally stepped up to the hobo. "It was a great honor meeting you, sir," he said. "And you as well, Walter. Remember." The hobo tapped his nose. "The secret's safe with me, sir," Wally whispered. "We'll be on the road," the hobo whispered back. "But if you need to get in touch, the missus might know where I am. Remember what I told you, Walter. Never give up." Wally pressed his hand to the pocket that held the notebook, in which he'd recorded the president's words. "Never, sir." Theodore Roosevelt winked, and then they were gone. I started for the dining room. Breakfast had been delayed so long it had become brunch. I was halfway down the hall when I realized Wally wasn't with me. I raced back and found him standing in front of Melvin with a most peculiar look on his face. "Walter," Melvin said, "stop staring." Wally appeared to be gazing at Melvin, but I knew he wasn't seeing him. I may have mentioned that Walter Kennewicket gets caught up in conundrums. I had overheard Oliver and Calypso discussing this dilemma the day I'd saved Wally from stepping into the elevator shaft. Calypso had been concerned over his seeming inattention to details such as open pits or people addressing him directly. Oliver had pointed out that one of their young German friends, Albert Einstein, often exhibited the same tendencies. He was certain both Wally and Albert would overcome their absent-mindedness to become great scientists one day.
"Why does he have that expression on his face, Mel?"
Prissy asked.
"He looks like a complete nincompoop."
"Well?" Melvin demanded. "What do you have to say for yourself, Walter? Why the foolish face?" "Whirligig," Wally said happily. The word filled me with a strange foreboding. "Well, we have something to say to you." Melvin moved closer. "Real Kennewickets have no tolerance for nincompoopery. While your parents are traveling with that tramp, stay away from us." I thought that was a top-notch idea. I took Wally's pants cuff in my teeth and tugged him toward the dining room. Wally was too focused on the diagrams he was drawing in his gravy to eat. "Not right," he muttered as I finished his last sausage. "Not quite, but with a slight modification. Yes." He put his fork down. "Noodles! To the lab!" Excellent. The lab was far away from Melvin and Prissy. Once we were there, Wally went to work, stopping only to pace and mutter about overcoming 1,000 obstacles. When he figured out some particularly puzzling problem, he would run his hand through his hair and laugh before rushing back to his bench. I yawned. Certain scientific moments are not exactly the stuff excitement is made of. Fortunately, the lab was well equipped for napping dachshunds. I found my pillow in the corner, turned my back on Jeeves's baleful gaze, and drifted off. Wally's hair was all standing on end when he woke me in order to demonstrate his invention. "It is finished, Noodles," he said, holding up a small vest with bat-like folding wings. I tried to shake the sleep out of my ears as he buttoned me into it. "You're amazing," Wally said. I wagged. Even a sleepy tail must respond when Wally says that. The wings flapped up and down. "You can do it, boy!" My wagger went wild. Suddenly, I came fully awake to find that I'd risen to the ceiling. My fear of falling into the air had come true. All that saved me from tumbling into the frightening blue firmament was the stone ceiling. My tail froze, and for one horrifying instant, I knew how Pilcher must have felt during the first moment of his fatal fall. Tail failure may cause tragedy. And then Wally caught me. "Mr. Roosevelt was right," Wally said happily. "You are practically as good as a whirligig, Noodles. Who should we show first? Gizmo? No. We'll wait for Mr. Jones and show them together." I checked my tail. It wasn't wagging. I didn't know if it would ever wag again. Wally took the unnerving vest off me and tucked it into one of his many pockets. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, but seeing in my mind's eye the terrifying starry expanse beyond. Chapter 8. When the steam engine puffed into Kennewicket Station at the foot of the mountain the next day, Prissy, Melvin, Wally, and I were gathered on the platform to greet the guests. By gathered, I mean that Prissy and Melvin were standing as far from Wally as they possibly could. My heart was as heavy as my eyelids, because I knew I was going to let Wally down. It was as if my tail had a mind of its own, a mind that could not ignore the coming catastrophe. It had not wagged once all morning. Not once. Mr. Jones leaped from the locomotive as the popcorn vendors poured off the train. My keen nose could find him even in the buttery, sweet-smelling sea of candy-striped coats, bamboo canes, and straw boater hats. Mr. Jones smells of soot and cinders, and his pockets are always full of spicy snickerdoodles. He's the only human I've ever known who can carry more tools about his person than Oliver Kennewicket. This is because there is so much more of Mr. Jones from which to hang useful items. "Hello, Noodles!" he boomed as he tossed me one of his famous snickerdoodles. Not even a depressed dachshund could resist such a treat. "Is your father at the inn, Walter?" Mr. Jones asked as Melvin and Prissy led the guests to the elevator that would carry them up the cliff.
I'm afraid he's away,
Wally said. "Away?" Mr. Jones asked, eyeing a dapper dandy who lagged behind the crowd of passengers.
On business,
Wally explained.
But I have something important to show you, sir. An invention of my own.
I sat down on my tail. It was as if disaster was rushing at me, and I had no way to elude it. Wally was going to ask me to fly, and I could not do it. Not again. I was doomed to fail Wally in his moment of greatest achievement. "Excellent," Mr. Jones said, glancing at his pocket chronometer. "I have a few spare minutes after my tea with Gizmo." I could only hope that the lovely automaton had brewed an extra-large pot. The engineer's interest in Gizmo may have started with a secret desire to discover her most delicious recipes, but it soon developed into a keen admiration for her mechanical mind. Since the train lingered long enough for the porter to deliver parcels, packages, and supplies, Mr. Jones always had time for a cup or 2 or 3 of Gizmo's tea.
She awaits us at the inn,
Wally said.
But first, do you know which of your passengers is Professor Potts? I have a note to deliver.
Dear me! We all whirled to discover that the dapper dandy had contrived to creep up behind us. Apologies for eavesdropping. Couldn't be helped. He lifted his hat. I'm Potts. Professor Potts. I woofed softly. Eavesdropping is listening to the private conversations of others. It is not polite. Potts glanced down at me, and in that unveiled instant, I knew that not only was he no gentleman, he did not like dogs. Do I understand correctly? His eyes lifted to Wally. Your parents are absent? Terrible disappointment. I've wanted to get hold of the Kennewickets for such a long time. Hard to catch them at symposiums. He glanced around. Where is Mr. Slade? I decided I did not like Professor Potts either. He didn't smell buttery or delicious, and he had enormous feet.
I'm Walter Kennewicket.
Wally shook Potts's hand.
And I'm afraid my parents' absence was unavoidable. Who is Mr. Slade?
New assistant. Professor Potts surveyed the crowd. Just hired the fellow. Can't miss him. Marvelous mustache. I dodged Professor Potts's feet as he turned about, apparently still searching for the unmissable Mr. Slade. He'll turn up, Mr. Jones said. Unless he leaped from the train. He can't have left us. When Potts stopped spinning, Wally handed him Calypso's note. Emergency, apparently, Professor Potts muttered as he read. Couldn't be helped. Still, very disappointing. I've researched the amazing automated inn, electrons, gyrating generator, automatons. Very impressive indeed. But I came for Oliver and Calypso, you see.
I hope I can assist you in their absence,
Wally said.
Since Mr. Slade is missing, may I carry your bag, sir?
Kind of you, the professor nodded. Very kind. I followed Wally, Professor Potts, and Mr. Jones to the elevator. We caught up with the vendors' convention in the lobby of the inn. Mr. Jones scooped me up. "Where's your wag, Noodles?" he asked, scratching my ears. "I've never seen you without it." Where indeed? Still, I was thankful to be out from under the vendor's boots, even if I had to listen to Melvin telling the story of the great rescue. It was the reason a portrait of a pigeon hung in the inn.
On a bright, sunny morning, just like this one.
He always says that, even if it's foggy outside.
A rock slide took out the trestle over the oblivion.
"The raging river on the other side of Gasket Gully?" a popcorn vendor asked.
The very same,
Prissy assured him.
You just traveled over it by train.
Yawn.
My father's pigeon niddernap.
This is where he spins to point at the pigeon portrait.
Flew to the next town, carrying a message that saved the train. Some of the Kennewickets.
He looked meaningfully at Prissy, as if to say, the real Kennewickets
have been raising heroic pigeons ever since.
Melvin's father had been no older than Melvin himself when he loosed the pigeon in the portrait, saving the train. He'd moved away a few years later, taking his birds and new bride with him.
Melvin recently met with the mayor,
Prissy said primly,
to let him know that, if needed, our pigeons will be ready.
Mail for Melvin, the porter, who had been sorting parcels in the corner, announced.
Mail for me?
Melvin looked surprised. I wasn't expecting anything. The porter handed him a blue box with stars and moons all over it, the kind of box a mesmerizing magician might use in his act. I barked a warning.
Don't open that, Mel!
Wally shouted.
Why ever not, nincompoop?
Melvin asked, pulling loose the twine that tied the box closed. Wally jumped forward.
We will go on to chapter 9 tomorrow.